So the Southern Summit here in Valdosta, Georgia is an edification seminar for every age. We have child care, teenager, women, men, preachers, preachers with elders, preachers without elders. This year our theme is lead, and so we're learning how to lead in various different ways of our life, even in our vocation. So even if you're not a preacher, you're not, quote, a Bible class teacher or something like that, this is an edification seminar just for you here in Valdosta, Georgia, the Southern Summit.
Preach the word. Be instant in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine. The Moultrie Church of Christ hosts a yearly event at the Rainwater Conference Center in Valdosta, Georgia, featuring over 10 speakers, and they have something for everyone. Teen classes, ladies classes, and a keynote speaker lineup you will not want to miss. Filmed on location by the Gospel Broadcasting Network, which proudly brings you the Southern Summit.
Hallelujah, thine the glory, revive us again.
This will be the session for this hour, 10 minutes of church growth. We have 4 individuals who have a lot of wisdom concerning church growth. Some of these men, not all of them, but some of them have my highest respect when it comes to the work of the church. These men do what they do, and they do it very well. We at Moultrie have made some changes and some adjustments and hired a new man who is very talented to do what he does, and so he'll get into that shortly. But this is a segment. Each man will go 10 minutes, and they're excited about just 10 minutes. But 10 minutes on what they've done and how successful it's been and how much growth the Lord has given concerning their work. And at the end, they have microphones. It'll be like a panel. If you have some questions, if you have some comments, feel free to ask those, and they will do their best to answer those accordingly. Brother Bill.
I told Jake he had thrown us a curveball and a fastball, getting us up here for 10 minutes. I talk so fast, it's going to take me, I'll get through quicker than the rest of them. But we were asked to speak on how to lead congregational growth. And the theme of the weekend is leadership. And in my lifetime, I do not think that we need this teaching any more than we do in 2019. So many places you hear, well, we're smaller than we were 2 years ago. We're smaller than we were 10 years ago. We're smaller than we were 30 years ago, and on and on and on. And many churches are closing the doors. Didn't Jesus say in Mark 16:15, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature? Well, we've got to be focused to do that. And I mean focused like an old magnifying glass that uses the light of the sun to light a fire that we used to do when we were children. We've got to pray. Matthew 9:38, we're to pray. When I was at Lakeland, and I've got 6 or 7 points, I'm not going to get to all of them. But for several months, we had a special prayer in our evening services just for church growth. And we were blessed. Doors open to us. We don't pray about it, people. We don't pray about it in our homes. We don't pray about it in the church building. Prayer will open doors. Jesus was focused. He set his face to go to Jerusalem in Luke 9 in verse 51. And he got the job done, didn't he? He said in John 17:4, I have finished the work you gave me to do. So some things we've done. At Forest Park, we're involved in Monday night for the Master now for 2 years. The first 8 months we did this, no visitation card was left. Every one of them was taken, probably about 40 or 50 a week. Right now we have probably 10 or 12 that's left every Monday. And these cards are on the absentees. If people say they're going to be out of town, they're not absent. On the sick, on the shut-in, and on the visitors. And people are given an opportunity to come and make a call, make a visit, make a note, and the ones that's in bereavement and all of those, we try not to leave anyone behind, as it were. And so it's a great, great work. Another thing we need in congregational growth is a great Bible school. In the work that I did, and I've worked in this area in 4 rural churches for 22 years. When we got there, the Sunday schools totaled 80. And in 22 years, we built it, thank the Lord, with His help, to 230. And it took a lot of work and a lot of growth, some additions, some new furniture, some people, and teachers had to be trained, and teachers had to be put into these classrooms, and we had graded material. Teachers didn't decide what they were going to teach one quarter and what they was going to teach the next. We wanted to go through in a systematic way. And we had evangelistic vacation Bible schools. In Lakeland, we averaged for the last 4 or 5 years getting 1 family per year in the congregation from Vacation Bible School. And we'd average double at Vacation Bible School than we did in worship. Did that at Adel, more than did that at Redland one year. And in Sylvester as well, we had a good Bible school. We practiced benevolence. And this didn't cost us one thing. And yet we reached dozens and dozens of people in Lanier County. We gave clothes away. We sat on Mondays from 8:30 to 11. We'd put it out on the sign about a week in advance, and the church building was on the main street, wondering if anybody would come. The first time we did it, we had 55 to come. The least time in the spring, when it'd get down to about 8 or 10 in April, we knew to stop until school started back in August. And we would take all of our clothing that was left and take it to what was the charity shop for the children's home. I don't know if it's still open now. But in other words, we didn't have polyester 10-year-old clothes to give away. And we had children's clothes. People came and bartered clothes. And when people would come from out of town and door knock in Lakeland, the response they came and told me says, "You are the church that helps people." Didn't cost us a dime. We took one classroom and filled it up with the clothes and would put it in and out, and 70% of our donations came from the community. We were known for that. And in the last year I was at Lakeland, 2 were restored and 5 baptized from this program alone. And then you can door knock to set up Jewel Miller DVD studies. We did this in Sylvester 3 years ago. 9 of us met one Saturday morning about 9:30. We went out till 11:30 or 12 and set up 12 Bible studies. About 1 out of every 8 that came to the door agreed to study. Well, what is this study? Well, there's 5 tapes, DVDs. And I was the one in charge. And I would go to this house and set them number 1. And maybe some of them would view 2 a week. Some of them would view 1 a week. It took some work. It took time. But by January, and we went out in October, 2 were baptized because 3 families out of the 10 that went through of the 12 we set up, 3 let us come into the home and sit down and study. These things will work if we will. And then we tried a campaign with out-of-town help. We did this at Lakeland, and in Sylvester. The Memphis School of Preaching came to Sylvester in the spring of 2016. About 8 or 10 of them came. 2 of our members helped and door knocked and did this and did that. 1 was restored. They'd been out of the church 35 years. 3 were baptized. One was the husband of a person that we had met through door knocking in October. 2 were sisters. We had met some of their family through door knocking in October. This cost $5,000, roughly, depending on how many you had to put up in the motel. I don't think we put up but 2 in the motel. And they left a small follow-up list. But we had one of the biggest attended meetings in the history of the congregations in entire history. All of these things involved work. And we worked from can to can't in these congregations. And when the minister of the church is seen working, it seems to promote that among the membership. And so a great number of the members would be involved and would help, because without the members' help, these works would not have gone forth. And so it's not dependent on one. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, but we as ministers, if you will, we have got to take the lead. Elders in some churches, and elders are not in all churches, and yet they can take the lead as well. But if the minister is not doing that, but brethren, many of you in this audience are not preachers or not elders. You need to take leadership. I'm not a preacher nor an elder at Forest Park, yet me and my wife studied with 6 different folks in 2018, and the Lord gave the increase on some of them. We need to get better equipped in our teaching ourselves, even though I've done a little bit of it. But thank you very much for your time this morning, and pray for us. Let's all pray for one another.
All right. Well, my name is Zach Griffin. I am the outreach minister for the Moultrie Church of Christ, so I get to work with Jake, which isn't so bad. But today I want to talk a little bit about social media evangelism. And the reason for this is because, if we look around at our world today and we recognize where people are on social media. Years and years ago, before cell phones came out, it was common that in a household you would have some kind of dessert, some kind of pound cake or something, just in case somebody stopped by your house. But that doesn't really happen anymore. I am all for door knocking. I've done some door knocking since we've been in Moultrie. But people aren't as receptive to that as they were in years before. And there's so many different ways to evangelize. There's, events, outreach events. There's, seed slinging with the radio and TV. And there's so many different ways to evangelize. But this is one that I think that is really important because of where people are. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 20 and 21, Paul said, "To the Jew I became like the Jew. To the one without the law, to the Gentile, I became like a Gentile." So he did that in order that he might save some. What we have to realize in the church is if we're going to reach a millennial, we've got to be like millennials. We've got to become like a millennial. If we're going to reach the generation under millennials, which is called the I generation, because they grew up with cell phones, with iPads when they were toddlers. And, in order to reach them, we have to become like I generation people. It's really that simple, but for some reason, we kind of put this away in the church for some reason. So let's just consider a couple of statistics here. 73%. And this is a study from 2018, this past year, by the Pew Research Center. 73% of all Americans are on YouTube regularly. And 68% of all Americans are on Facebook regularly. Now that's more than 2 in 3 of all Americans on Facebook. Now, there's a lot of other social media sites. There's Instagram and Twitter and all these others, but those reach closer to maybe like 40 or 30%. These two are singularly the greatest, most visited, most trafficked social media sites. around. And if we think about those younger generations, and this may surprise you, it may not, but 94% of all Americans between 18 and 24 are on YouTube regularly. That's nearly all of that age group. And then an even greater age group, 18 to 49-year-olds, 80% of them are on Facebook regularly. Now, we have to recognize that and look at that, and we have to understand that social media is really kind of like the marketplace of the first century. People in the first century, they would gather to those marketplaces, and they would go and they would trade, and they would discuss, and they would post jobs, and they would converse, and they would share ideas at these marketplaces. Well, where does that happen now? It happens on social media. If we're going to be like Paul, as he said, to the Jew I became a Jew, and to the Gentile I became a Gentile, we've got to recognize where people are. Paul, Jesus, Peter, they went to where people were and spoke the truth, the gospel to them. And so that's what we've been trying to do, the Moultrie Church. Since we have been involved in social media evangelism, we've gained about 600 likes on our page in about 3 months. And basically, a page is your section of Facebook. It's basically your website on Facebook. And a like means that if someone likes your page, all of the content that you put out, they receive that content. It comes up in their feed, and as they're scrolling through, they're seeing all the stuff that you post because they liked your page. That means that we've got 1,500 likes on our Moultrie Church of Christ Facebook page. That's more than all the churches in our county, except for one which has 1,000 members at it. It's a community church. We have nearly 1,000 interactions every single week. And an interaction is when somebody sees that content and they like it or they comment on it. That seed is planted in them so much that they're willing to interact with what we have posted. And you may not think, okay, well, this is online. This is not doing anything in the real world. Well, since we started this, I guess once we started, I met somebody at Publix that I went to high school with and hadn't seen him in a long time, but he came up and he hugged me and he said, hey, I've seen your stuff online. I've seen it on Facebook, and I really want to come and visit your church. So social media evangelism is really important. And the reason why we've been successful in this so far is for 3 reasons. We provide consistent quality content. If you're posting consistently quality content, you're going to have a group of people, these viewers, who are waiting for that content. If you just post once and then you wait several months and then you don't have an audience there that's listening. But if you're posting consistently, you're going to have that audience there waiting for you. Also, posting about current events. We've had 2 posts just about prayer requests that have one reached over 250,000 people, and the other one reached over 300,000 people. It was just a prayer request, a picture and a prayer request. And those developed likes on our page, and then that means they receive all of our content about the gospel, about what the Bible is, about what the church is. So posting about current events is important, and using social media as the platform to which it's meant to be. Social media is meant to be social. It's about a community. And what has God given us that is the greatest community that has ever existed in this world? It's the church. We are all about community. And so this community platform of social media, we bring the church into that, and people will see, well, they're on Facebook, they're on YouTube because they want community. And when they find this community of believers that aren't just friends, but brothers and sisters in Christ, that's attractive. I want to talk just in the little bit of time I have left about some specific things that we've been doing. So one of the things that we've done is played around with some equipment. And if you're scrolling through and you're looking at these two videos, which one do you want to click on? Well, you're going to want to click on the top one because it looks more attractive. It looks more, like put together and more professional. But the only difference is because those are in the same room. They were taken with the same room and with the same camera. But one was taken with a black sheet behind it and one LED light. That's the only difference. Not a lot of money to do that, to have a professional look. We also do this thing called Monday Morning Preacher. It's a show that we do each Monday morning, Jake and I, and we actually had a guest this last time, Josh Cantrell. But it's just, we get on, we talk about the lessons that we've done the day before, and it generates interest into the church. We have a new project that we're working on. It's premiering next Friday at 7 o'clock on Facebook called We Are Overcome. I don't have the time to talk about it today, but it's about being transparent to our community, inviting people to come in and recognize that we are real people with a real God, and we suffer through real trials just like everybody else does. It's about being transparent, and so we're inviting people in our community to come and see that we are real people. And if you don't have a series, if you don't have something that you can commit to and say, well, I'm going to do this series and have all these different parts here, just post quality content consistently. It doesn't matter what it is, what the topic is, as long as it's quality and you're doing it consistently, you're going to build interest in the church, in God's word, and in the truth. I want to leave this up here for just a second. If you've got questions about the technology we use, the equipment, any Facebook stats or anything like that, moultriecocmedia@gmail.com. If you'll send me an email, I'll answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Y'all notice in looks, it's kind of going in descending order here. Beloved, it's wonderful to see everybody, and of course we are very grateful to be able to stand before you all, our brethren, and share with you some of the things that we have tried. I'm sure these other gentlemen would say, it's been a trial and error kind of thing. We've made some mistakes. We've looked at some things. We've tried some things that for our particular congregation is not working at this time, and so we look at that and say, what are we going to do? In all of this, and I've got basically 10 minutes to share with you what we've been trying to do for the last 4 or 5 years. We began an earnest study on church growth and looking at dying churches, looking at churches that are growing and what's the difference and what can we do at the Lake Park Church of Christ, which is where I preach. And my name's Marvin Green. I was supposed to tell you that at the beginning. I just got delved right into this. But anyway, one of the things, I've been there going on 16 years now in that congregation. And brethren, there's something to be said for that. And you know the studies probably that in a lot of smaller churches, one of the problems they have is that preachers will come and go and use them as a stepping stone and stay a year or two, and that it's very difficult to grow a congregation with that kind of a turnover. But we had to begin by developing what I call a culture of growth at our congregation. And by that I mean this. When you go to what I call a typical small town church, there's this idea that you can't grow. And that the reason there's that idea is because for most of their history, they haven't grown. They'd go up a little bit here and there and then down and fluctuate like this and that. The Lake Park was no different than that. They would have their times when they were growing a little bit, but then throughout their history, it'd be kind of up and down, and a large overturn of ministers and everything. And so when I got there, and with other churches I've been involved with, there's this idea that the church can't grow. People would verbalize that. They'd say, a church in a small town can't grow. People in the congregation say, Brother Green, we can't grow here. And I'd ask them why they thought that. Well, because we never really have, and anything we do is always temporary, and there's never anything that really sticks, and we have a high turnover, and it just doesn't work. And I had very well-meaning preachers who love me dearly have come to me and said, Brother Green, you're wasting your time in a small town. You need to go to a larger city where there's more potential and where there's potential to grow. That small town churches can't grow. I've had people come to me and say, they'd hear that we were growing a little bit, and they'd say, if you're growing, you must be doing something wrong. Now, beloved, I don't know where we've ever got to that point. So over the past few years, we were coming close to 200 in attendance, but we were unable to break that 200 mark. We kept banging up against it, and then it settled back down to around 170. And so we began to look at that and say, what in the world is it why can't we get over that hump, so to speak? And we did about a 4-year study on church growth, and we just decided that it's time that we need to make a lot of changes towards the end of 17 is when we really started putting these things into practice. And beloved, one of the things we had to do was take a self-assessment, and we're going to talk about that. But we've had to make some changes, and we began at the end of 2017 and earnest into 2018. It took us about to April of 2018 to really get things kicked off, and since then we have saw growth from April to the end of the year of 23%. We went from an average of 173 in 2017 to an average of 213 by the end of 2018. And so what did we do to do that? And we're still on the upward trend, thank God. One, we had to do a self-assessment. The Apostle Paul says to examine yourself or to test yourself to see if you're still on the faith. And we have learned that the hardest exam to take is a self-exam. It was painful. We had to be very honest. And it was very painful. And we looked at the Lord's church in general, brethren, and I don't have time to go into the stats right now, but you all know if you've studied that. I know some of our brotherhood papers have looked into that, but it's not good. We're dying. Overall, the Church of Christ in the United States is dying. Churches are closing doors on a weekly basis. And so we looked at what it was in the Lord's church overall, and then we honed in on us. And what were we doing or not doing, okay? One, there was a lack of evangelism that has not been pushed and taught in the churches, and so we looked at that. There was a study that says 51% of churchgoers don't know what the Great Commission is. Couldn't tell you what it is. And so we had to look very seriously at that. Why are we not evangelizing people out in the world? And then secondly is what we call the Kodak effect, and what has been called a Kodak effect, and that is the refusal to respond to change, to the massive change and shift in our culture. We're still trying to do things in our churches sometimes the way they were done in the 50s, and as our brother just very well pointed out, things have changed since then. And so we've had to look at that and say, how do we reach this upcoming generation? Thirdly was confusing the method with the mission. In other words, it seemed to be an unwillingness to change our methods in order to support the mission, which is to go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. We have been more in love with the past than with the future. And so we had to change that. What are we talking about? As has been mentioned, the Apostle Paul says, I become all things to all men so that by all means I may win some. We're talking about the all means, brethren. We must never change the message. We understand that. The message never changes, but the method on how we reach in each generation has to change. And what worked with one generation may not work with another. So we've had to come to that realization. We have had a failure to define and a vision and a plan. You know, you've heard the saying that if you aim at nothing, you hit it with great accuracy. And so the term holding our own has become popular in the church. But brethren, we don't hold our own for very long because people my age are going to die. And so we either reach out or we fade out. We've got to bring people in the front door and shut the back door, and we've got to do both effectively because some congregations are good at bringing people in, but then we lose a lot of our members, especially our youth. And so we've had to look at that. And so we've developed what's called a 5-year plan. And you know, what are our goals? And we're working on a 10-year plan so that we can do that. I've asked some of my fellow ministers, what is your 5-year plan? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Well, I am, but they look at me that way and say, we don't have one. Brethren, we've got to have a plan. We've got to have a means to carry that plan out. The second is we've had to change our focus because, beloved, for the most part, and I'm not being critical, we're just taking a hard look at ourselves. For the most part, our focus has been on the physical facilities, you know. What do we do about this grass? What do we do about these lawnmowers? What do we do about the lights? What do we do? It's all been on that. You have an elders meeting, a men's meeting, a deacon meeting, whatever you want to call them, a leadership meeting, and it's all been on, okay, the budget and the building and this and that. And while those things are important, that's not the first priority. And so we've had to focus outward now. We're looking more outward, and we're putting all, and so that's one of the problems that we've had and that a lot of churches have. And then, of course, and I've got 2 minutes to tell you what we are doing. We were putting almost everything on the minister. Now, that's not just in Lake Park. That's in a lot of small congregations. And so what do we have to do? We found out in our study that there's a thing called the 200 barrier. It's in several church growth publications that a lot of times you reach 200 and this is what happens, and you can't get over that 200 barrier. And there's reasons for that, which I don't have time to go over. I'm going to flip through several pages. And what have we done, okay, to break that 200 barrier, okay? Brethren, and I'm sorry I can't go into detail on these. We've moved from an elder-led, elder-controlled method to passing that off to other leaders that can take the job the elders used to be doing, which was more the physical, and giving it to them and free our elders up to do what is scriptural, and that is to be shepherds of the flock, and not have to worry about all that physical and the financial and all that other stuff. And so our elders can actually be the shepherds that the Bible calls them to be. We have been developing a roadmap, as we call it, with clearly defined vision and goals. Again, you've got to have something to shoot for. We want to say, this is what our goals are. We are becoming outside focused and unapologetically focusing on evangelism. It's not about everything within the church. How can we reach out to our community? We are developing a clear path for guests to become regulars, as they're called, and regulars to become members. We found that sometimes that takes a little while with this generation, but it's worth the effort. We're developing a irresistible children's and youth ministry, and that should be very odd. We are encouraging and focusing on evangelism unapologetically. We need to make that the center of what we do. Okay, and so, brethren, there's other things. I'm out of time. That's been a frustration. I was saying what we've been doing the last 5 or 6 years over in a 10-minute period. I hope you got at least a little bit of an idea. We're not there yet. We're not done. We've still got a lot to do. But please pray for us, and we appreciate your attention very, very much. Thank you.
I would like to cede my time and just let these guys talk some more. I really appreciate everything that everybody's doing. I'm Bill Watkins. I'm at the Creve Hall Church of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee, congregation in one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, and one that is becoming almost at the center of that urban development that's going on. And so our challenges are a little bit different there than they are in some other places that might be a little more rural. But I think that some of the things that we do might be helpful to anybody. Unfortunately, a congregation tends to go through 5 stages. It starts with a man with a dream, a commitment to the Lord, a desire for lost souls, wanting to do the Lord's work, and he's so excited about it that he actually begins to convert people, change things, and people's lives get changed. And as they do, that movement comes into play. So you have a man with a mission, and people catch fire all around him, and it becomes a movement, and that goes on, and people are excited, and they love each other, and they're doing things out of the enthusiasm and love for God that they do, and it goes on for a while, and then someone finally of an organized mind says, we're not very organized. We're not doing this very well. What we really need to do is to organize this, because people are falling through the cracks, and so they began programs, ministries of the church that are trying to meet those needs so that nobody is going to be left out. And that goes on for a while, and after a while, it becomes a machine. It runs itself. We have a ministry because we have a ministry. We have a gospel meeting because we always do. We have a VBS because that's what we expect. We do our Bible classes because we've always done Bible classes. Everything becomes a machine, and it runs itself. And as that goes on for a while, people realize folks aren't as enthusiastic as they used to be. And it seems like people aren't as excited as they used to be. Things were, at one point, we remember when people were excited and willing to sacrifice and do, and something has happened to us. And then they begin to think about how great it was back in the day what it was like when we were all excited and we were working together. And so we want to honor those elders and that minister and these people, and we begin to put up different things to honor them. And our thing that began as a man and became a movement and then turned into a machine becomes a monument to the glory of our past. And we build bigger buildings and nicer ones and hire more eloquent preachers, and we do all sorts of stuff so that we think that that will give honor to our historic and wonderful history. But before long, the memorial becomes a mausoleum. And the only way that we find of changing that is for one young man generally who says, I can't live like this. And he starts out on his own, and the cycle starts again. And I don't know where you are in your congregation. If you were to put it in one of those 5 stages, where would you be right now? I can tell you where we've been, and I won't tell you, but I could tell you where we've been at Creve Hall, and we've made a distinct effort to stop that process and turn it back into a movement, to stop that process and make a difference. And we're doing several things, and I just want to share with you some of the things that we're doing that I hope will help. And some of them are going to seem fringe, but they're very helpful. By the way, I completely agree with Zach on the social media. Facebook live streaming your sermons, putting them on YouTube, doing the things that need to be done. You will change people, not necessarily in your community, but you will change people. We are preaching every week to a congregation now in West Australia who doesn't have a preacher. They say, can we use your stuff? They do it every time, and it's social media. There's all kinds of things. I have 2 Baptist churches that are using my sermons now for their auditorium class, which I particularly appreciate, and I always make sure to mention what baptism is for and the other things that are there. I want them to hear it. But let me give you some things. Here's one that I really like that has made a difference in our community and in our congregation. One of our deacons is in charge of what we call a FaithWorks ministry. He is by occupation a landscaper. And he decided, after seeing the state of a lot of our elderly members, the state of their houses and their yards, that somebody ought to do something about that. And so he began this ministry to reach out to people who can no longer take care of their property. And so about once a month, they will gather together and they'll paint a house, they will do landscaping, mow the lawn, take care of the things that need to be done. If there's something in the house that needs to be washed up, they're going to take care of that. And they do it not just for the people who are members of our congregation, but also when he drives down the road and he sees somebody who's obviously in some distress, he asks them, is there anything we can do for you? We have a ministry that comes in and takes care of these things. Could we do that? We'd like to do it without charge to you. And so the church has a minimal amount of money that we actually put out with that, but it's increased our attendance and made a difference with the folks that have been helped, and that has been a wonderful thing. We have 2 young deacons who are outdoorsmen. They love hunting and they love fishing, and they have begun the Outdoor Outreach Men's Ministry. And once a month, they go and do something. Maybe they fish, maybe they canoe, maybe they hunt, maybe they go shoot clay pigeons, maybe they do something else. But every month, they have some kind of activity, and with that activity is a Bible study and a time for them to come together. And people come who enjoy hunting and fishing and being outside, who aren't a part of our congregation at times, but they're there, and we've been able to increase our membership through people who come through that. I found that doing a series and doing it without just doing it traditionally makes a difference. I decided some time ago that I would preach on baptism, and I didn't want to use any of the sermons I'd ever heard on baptism before. I wanted to do a unique and original study about baptism, and I took week after week on baptism. And the amazing thing, because I didn't know what would happen, the attendance started increasing each Sunday. We were getting people who were from denominational and groups, community churches, and some that were unchurched entirely, who were coming and listening every week. And when I would ask them, they said, because you're not talking about how we ought to behave in our job, you're talking about how to go to heaven, and we really want to know. And they would come. At the end of about 7 weeks on a study of baptism, we hadn't had anybody baptized. But I knew that the attendance was increasing, and it was going to be my last week. And so I said, this is my last week on this subject, and I have a feeling that some of you have questions that you just don't feel very comfortable asking in a public setting. So I'm going to be here in the auditorium at 2:30 this afternoon. I'll be sitting on the front row. If any of you have a question or simply want to come and talk or pray, I'll be here for you. I'll just be here. I got there and into the auditorium at 2:30, and the line was out the door. We baptized 7 people that afternoon. And not only baptized 7 people, but I can't tell you how many people we prayed for, how many people needed to understand a little bit more about what baptism was. I think it's an effective way of doing it. Preach in a way that speaks to people where they are, but preach the truth. And do it so consistently that people want to know more. It's amazing what that did. And by the way, as a result of that, our elders now during our Bible classes, 2 elders every Sunday during the Bible classes, let it be known that they are in a certain room, and anybody who needs prayer, anybody who has an issue they want to talk about, anybody who wants to talk about their soul, they're there. And every Sunday people come. Every Sunday. Makes a difference when you do those things. I want to tell you that in an urban setting, and Zach and I are pretty much on the same page with this, on an urban setting, we found in Nashville that nobody wants you to come and knock on their door unless you're Hispanic in a Hispanic community or Black in a Black particular community that the Anglo community absolutely resist. In fact, I don't know how it is around here, but when was the last time somebody you didn't know knocked on your door and you said, "Oh boy, visitors"? You didn't do that. We value our privacy. We really do in America. So here's the way we've gone about making a difference in that. And it's one of the ways we've gone about making a difference in that. Start a Bible study in your home with members of the church that live somewhere near you. Start a Bible study with members of the church. And have the people who are in that Bible study encourage them to invite someone to come with them. And it's incredible how people who would never walk in the door of a church building will walk into your home. And so we have an easy dinner, something that doesn't take a lot to prepare, and people are invited to come in. We study the Bible. Oftentimes we give them the option, you pick the passage you want to start with. You pick the book you're interested in. And we'll take that and turn that study ultimately toward not only what to do to be saved, but how to live to keep saved. And people come. It makes a difference. In an urban setting, not during service times, let me just say that, but during the week, if you will have a Bible study in your home and encourage those who come that are members to bring one person with them, you'd be amazed the difference that it makes. Well, my time is up. Thanks, guys.
Well, I appreciate that. A lot of wisdom. The work works when we work it. That's the truth. We're going to take this time. Does anybody have any questions or maybe anything like that that you may want to ask one of these guys or several? Yes.
Just one more thing. I'm sorry. We have changed. Let me just say one more thing in another area that has changed us and actually increased the number of people who are members at Creve Hall. We've changed the way we do benevolence. I don't know how you do benevolence, but I can tell you how it's been in most congregations where I've been, and that is that people are just, people come, they ask for money, you give them money, you never feel good about it. You know, you say, well, am I being cheated? What's going on here? We give them money, we send them away, we never see them again until maybe they show up again and they knock on your door and they ask for money again. We've stopped doing that. I will tell you that when I first came to Creve Hall, 85% of all of our benevolent budget went to people who walked in off the street. 15% went to people in the congregation that we know had needs. And that was the way that generally worked for us. We've changed that. About 5% of our budget for benevolence now goes to people who walk in off the street. But what really we do is different. We've made a commitment. We've changed the way that we do benevolence. When someone comes in and they need help, they begin first asking them, where do you want to be in a year? Where would you like to be in 2 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And how can we help you get there? We're willing to make a commitment to be with you and work with you at least for the next 5 years to help you get where you want to be. Where do you want to be? And if they say, well, I really don't want to change, we don't help them. But if they say, this is where I would like to be, and this is where I am, then we help them get there. and we make a commitment to them. We invest a lot more money in individuals than we did in the past. If a person has a drug problem, I can tell you that our benevolence committee has sent them to in-house drug care at times so that they can help them get off drugs. When they have a relapse on the drugs, they will help them again. But that kind of benevolence has made a difference. Our benevolence now is if we see someone in the neighborhood whose house is burned or something else is we go to them. How can we help you? We don't wait for people to come. And if people do come, then we ask them certain questions and ask them to make a commitment with us, and we'll help them. That's changed us. Thanks.
Thank you, brother. There was one question. Go ahead.
We have looked at a lot of different material, brethren, and just kind of compiled it together. And each congregation will have to do it for their particular need. Every congregation, we're all in the same book, brethren, but you go to different congregations, they have what I call a different flavor sometimes, just putting different emphasis, or maybe they have a different group or different age dynamic than we have. So we looked at a lot of different church growth stuff. To be honest with you, some of it is out in the denominational world. Now, we do as the old preacher used to say, you eat the fish, get the meat, and throw the bones away. So, we've been in the Lord's church long enough to know what is scriptural and what may be man's opinion. But brethren, we have discovered, at least in my humble opinion, that in the Lord's church there's not a lot of material on what I would call practical church growth where we reach out. So we've had to take some outside sources and say, okay, these principles will work. We're not talking about anything unscriptural at all. And in fact, we've challenged our elders to make sure that we stay on the straight and narrow as far as that is concerned, and we have done that. But we've looked at as a lot of different sources and everything, and obviously, some of the stuff you just throw out outright because good and well, and be against God's word. But then there are other things that are good principles that we can apply, bring into the Lord's church and grow in that regard. So I guess a short answer to your question, if this is short, is that we've just looked at a variety of different material, and that we could say this is what we can use in our particular need and to incorporate. I guess scripturally becoming all things to all men. That we may by all means. This brother talked about benevolence. Different ones have talked about different things that are working very effectively in their congregation, and I think we all have to find that niche. We're also, as this brother mentioned, on the internet a lot, and things of that nature. Did that help you? Thank you.
Is this on? Is it on now? Oh, good. Yes, we're seeing it work. It does make a difference, and we have conversions through that. I would not say that door knocking doesn't work. I would say that door knocking doesn't work in certain contexts. In other contexts, it works really well. It depends on, I think, sometimes the character and culture of the neighborhoods that you go into. But for us, in our area, it doesn't work very well at all. But people are willing to come in. So, yes, it does work. One of the things that we try to do is to, I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow morning. So let me just say this, because some of you are not going to be able to be here tomorrow morning, and I get that. But you cannot control the growth of the church, nor can you control the members of the church. You can empower the members of the church. And by empowering the members of the church with what Michael Whitworth talked about this morning in the way you do your education program, in giving people the authority to do what the Lord has already told them to do. I had a couple one time say, Brother Watkins, I was preaching in a meeting, and they said, we want to have a Bible study in our home, but we can't get a meeting with the elders to get permission to do it. And I said, why do you need permission from the elders to do what God told you to do? Are you trying to meet while the church is meeting somewhere? And they said, no. I said, then have your meeting. Do what you do. Study the scriptures with people. You have to empower people to do it. You can't control people. Everything that you control dies. Everything that you empower grows. And so you give them the tools and the ability and do that. And people who are doing it are going to have all kinds of questions. But yes, it does work. So I hope that answered your question. That hasn't been the case for us in terms of inhibiting the amount of people who attend our services. That hasn't been the case. Maybe one of the reasons is because we don't call it small groups. And I really think, I'll just tell you, wording is everything. You know, there was a congregation that didn't want to have an auditorium class, and so they told everybody, we're going to meet back over here in this large classroom, and they just almost had a rebellion until they put the name on the door of that small room, and it said auditorium class. It's what you call it. I don't know why, but so we don't call it small groups. But no, we didn't have any resistance to it. Oh yeah, and I will tell you, there will be people that it won't work with. I mean, there are people who don't want to work with it. But in terms of us, to give you just one example, there is a lady who recently had gotten out of prison, who came to us. She had a drug problem. She had all kinds of financial issues, everything else that was going on with her. And the men, and we have now about 9 men in charge of benevolence. And I would recommend a team of benevolence people, not just one guy over it. It's too much for one person. But they met with her, and then they assigned to her someone who is a financial counselor. They helped her get the treatment that she needed for the drugs. They helped her get her child involved with the school and get the things that needed to be done to get that child enrolled in the school. They work with her every week. A group of ladies work with her on a regular basis, and she is there, and her child is involved and has become a Christian. And now her sister has become a Christian as well. So that's one of the examples. I think of another who was actually a member who came, and turns out she was addicted to prescription pain drugs. They offered to help her and put out it was going to cost close to $20,000 for her to go for in-house treatment. And they said, we're willing to do that. If that can help you get through this, we're willing to do it. Now, in her case, she said, no, I don't want to quit that much. And so we had a failure. We have successes and failures, but there are a number of folks that have come just because they've been helped like that.
Okay. So I guess it just depends on the content that we're doing. So like, for instance, Monday Morning Preacher, we do that each Monday morning. It's a live show. There's a little bit of setup for that, about 30 minutes of setup, and the show's like 30 minutes long. So that's only an hour of that time. And so I guess it just depends on the content. As you know, we've been doing this, we've become, I guess, more familiar with the software and different things like that. And so our time, you know, doing the editing and all of that stuff for, I guess, other kinds of videos, it's decreasing. And so I think it's important that we're not just doing, because it may seem that, you know, in doing all of this social media stuff, yeah, it will take a lot of time. But one thing that Jake and I are sort of kind of getting at each other with is recognizing there's all these different types of evangelism. We can't just put ourselves in one category and say, all right, we're going to do social media evangelism. We're not going to knock any doors. We're not going to have any events. We're not going to, you know, distribute material in other ways. And so that is a concern, absolutely. So I guess it really sort of depends on what the content is. You know, for some videos, you got to do all the filming, and then you've got to do the cuts, and then you've got to, you know, do all the other stuff with that too, and it can take a few hours. Yeah, what happens, and this is amazing, the amount of, you know, those interactions that come in. You work on a video, or you shoot something like we do Monday Morning Preacher. Well, people are commenting on it on Wednesday, and I mean, so that content is out there, and people are continually getting to that. And I guess what's great about Facebook too is that if you've got a page and are doing, you know, content, and you want to see the statistics on that, Facebook has a great program there. It shows our response time to when people send us a private message is about 30 minutes. Somebody sends us a message, we're usually back to them within at least 30 minutes. And so, yeah, we're commenting with them, we're, you know, doing that. And a lot of that is just really simple, like we may pull out our phone and just kind of message them back. Maybe it's 8 o'clock at night, but it's just a continual thing that we do.
Concerning the videos, if it's just just an announcement, if you're making a community announcement, there's some statistics about people, they'll watch videos for only so long. So if it's a sit-down study, they'll entertain a 10, 15, maybe even a 30-minute video. But if it's not, you want to get something impactful into their ear within a minute. And so you're looking at a 5-minute process, a total of 5 minutes, where you've just taught this person what the Bible teaches about giving or baptism or so on. So it just depends on, what your content is. We could sit down all day and just preach, but most people won't hear that the way society is. The statistics are, within a minute, you lose them. So it's really not a whole lot of time. And just content on a regular basis, people appreciate brevity and they appreciate neatness. That's what we've found out. Yes, sir. Probably chances are there's people in the crowd that already know what to do. And it's kind of like what Brother Watkins was saying. If you'll come back, there's a session on leading by delegation a little bit later. Learning how to delegate this to people who already know what to do, and you give them purpose and you give them service, and they're ready to go. A lot of people know they want something to do, but they don't know necessarily what to do. And so people who are have a vision like you, Brother Bernard, put it in the hands of people who are very capable. But absolutely, Zach is free.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I put the email up there for a reason. If you've got questions, contact me. But I'm going to give you all a little tip that has helped me out. The equipment and all of that stuff, YouTube. YouTube has explanations of how to do everything. You look up a YouTube video on how to do lighting on a budget. That's what I did. And we were able to put in some quality content. And I think all of our studio equipment is less than $200. It's so.
Well, thank y'all for your attention and your time. Very applicable session. Hope you enjoyed it.
So be rekindled with fire from above. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Revive us again.